See if I can get these folks to come in. You know, I made that little opening sequence, and we've got so much to cover tonight. I'm going to do away with it and show on the road here. Lots of late breaking nature news tonight.
Good.
Yay! But you know what? We're going to start with some old news. And you people are going to think, oh my gosh, can she just quit with the cicadas? But write about them again one more week. Cicadas, this whole phenomenon is just so unusual that we have 17-year cicadas in a year that is not in the 17-year. They are actually cicadas that have been appearing in Cook, Will, DuPage. There was a few in Lake, Winnebago, and then I found out today out in LaSalle County. So we are going to revisit them one more time because, believe it or not, they do relate to some of the other things that we're seeing. So let me see here. I'm going to pull up some slides. Because once we get an emergence like this, there's going to be things that are interested in feeding. So what eat periodical cicadas? And a better question might be, what doesn't eat periodical cicadas? You know, I remember being down in Southern Illinois oh gosh, this would have been in 2005, I believe. In Southern Illinois, they have a different type of periodical cicada. Down in Southern Illinois, in the southern states, those cicadas are on 13-year cycles, as opposed to up here, the 17-year cycle. And you know, there were birds in the trees, there were snakes on the ground, there were box turtles in Southern Illinois that were munching on cicadas. They're a substantial insect, and they are full of protein. And they're plentiful. The cicada, the periodical cicada, we touched briefly on this last week. The whole reason that we have periodical cicadas, well, the full reason is probably a mystery still. There's still some things we don't quite understand. But when it comes to what the this 13-year, 17-year periodical nature, math people probably realize those are prime numbers. And by coming out in 13-year or 17-year intervals, these insects are eliminating a lot of predators that have even numbered life cycles. So 2, 4, 6, 12, a prime numbered life cycle sort of gets rid of groups or parts of groups of predators. So with that said, there's still a lot of things that are around and eating these insects. Now this, I've got to thank Bob and Kathy Andrini. Bob, those of you who are members of Kane County Audubon know that Bob produces a Birder's Notebook. And last week he came out with the yellow-billed cuckoo. And I just recently saw one of these for the first time at Hickory Knolls. It was a couple of weeks ago. It was in the bushes by the building. And cuckoos, they are, I wouldn't call them, you know, they're not rare, like endangered rare, but they're difficult to spot because they're, you know, they hang out in the trees, and they're not terribly overt. They're not a bird per se that you'd see in your backyard. They do, however, eat insects. And they eat, and they're one of the few birds that will actually eat fuzzy insects. going to get to our surprise guest here in a few minutes, but they'll eat tent caterpillars, and they also eat cicadas. Now, Bob had sent this Birder's Notebook out last week because a lot of people were reporting yellow-billed cuckoos. He's been seeing yellow-billed cuckoos. And then just a few minutes ago, I got this. The black-billed cuckoo is also being seen in the area. It's even more secretive than the yellow-billed cuckoo. Now, you can't draw a direct line between the emergence of periodical cicadas and the appearance or the numbers of cuckoos that are being seen. There's lots of other factors that come into play, but I would say that, you know, it's maybe a little bit more than coincidence that people are seeing more cuckoos this year, and we are also seeing our periodical cicadas. Now, with that said, I'm gonna quit sharing the screen here, and we're gonna go back. I'm gonna bring up let's see, let's go to our special guest. Now, I don't know, this is going to veer off from periodical cicadas for just a minute, but just a few minutes ago when I was taking the tech support puppy out for his walk, little Boker's here with me again tonight, I almost stepped on this creature that was on the front step here at the marketing annex where my office is. This creature is a fuzzy caterpillar. It's not a tent caterpillar though. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of blue dots, and I apologize, this is hard to see. I probably should have tried to find a picture. Pairs of blue dots followed by pairs of a deep maroon dot. It's the only caterpillar around here that's like that. Fuzzy, pairs of blue dots, pairs of maroon dots. It's a gypsy caterpillar. Yeah. And gypsy moths, as you know, they can be kind of problematic when they get to be present in large numbers. They can defoliate a tree. Back when I worked down at Red Oak Nature Center, we lost a white oak tree to gypsy moth caterpillars. It took 2 years for it to die, but that was back in maybe 2005 or so. The county, or maybe it was the state at the time, they were spraying it's a bacteria that attacks caterpillars. It's not specific to just gypsy moths. It does kill all caterpillars, so they try to be very careful when they're applying it so they're not wiping out all the caterpillars at once. But they usually drop it by helicopter, or I think it's by helicopter, they spray it. And it will take care of these guys. It was too late to save that one oak tree, but I think maybe a lot of other oak trees were saved. The gypsy moths did not spread. But over the years, I have seen out in front of my office here, 213 West Walnut in St. Charles, there's a big bur oak tree. And over the years, I've seen gypsy moth cocoons. I've seen the flightless females. The males are a white moth, and there's lots of white moths. So don't think every white moth is a gypsy moth male, but the males are flighted and they flutter around a tree looking for the flightless females, and the female will deposit a tannish egg case in the grooves of the bark. Looks like they're back out here again this year. This tree has never been defoliated. It just comes every year. It will kind of maybe have a few. Some year there's none. But I wonder if other places are seeing gypsy moths as well, and that may account for our cuckoo. Just a guess, just a thought. But any of you who would like to come and see a gypsy moth caterpillar, I invite you to stop on by the annex here, because I'm not back outside. It'll be on my desk for a while. All right. Getting back to our cicadas, still not, I got a call yesterday from a woman in Marseilles, Illinois, towards Ottawa. And she said she has a terrible problem with moles in her yard. And what can she do to get rid of her moles in her yard? And, okay, the common culprit with moles in yards is grubs. Typically it is, we all in? The
Yeah, Pam. Hi, Mary Tebow. I couldn't get in.
Oh, welcome, Mary.
Hi.
You haven't missed much. I've just been going on about cicadas again.
Oh my. Well, I have, for the meeting, just let you know, I have hawk questions.
Well, do we lose you, Mary? You still there? All right. Well, we'll hope Mary can rejoin us. Nancy was a woman in Marseilles who called and said that her lawn was just riddled with mole tunnels. And when her daughter would mow the grass that was grazing, it was taking, sometimes the mower would actually choke because it was getting jammed by all the soil and the grass and the turf that the moles had raised up. When a mole tunnels through the ground, they make these raised tunnels, kind of shaped. Did we lose her? Anyway, moles can wreak havoc. If you want a perfect yard and you have moles, you're gonna have to figure something out. Usually when you have moles in your yard, you have Japanese beetle grubs. Japanese beetle grubs tend to feed on the roots of grasses. You get rid of grubs, you usually get rid of the moles. Well, Nancy said that she had treated her lawn for grubs and she still had moles. So I started thinking, well, what else lives in the ground that would be substantial, that would draw a lot of moles? Now, at this point, this is just a guess because I made Nancy promise she would call me in a couple of weeks and let me know how things are going. But I think there was a big cicada emergence in Marseilles a few weeks ago too. And I'm thinking that moles came in and were feeding on the cicada larvae. So I have this was actually stuffed local taxidermist and King County Audubon member, Paul Meisler. He took pity on me because I tell you, for 10 or 12 years, I've been carrying this jewelry case around with this little mole in it. The thing is so worn out, it's got bald spots on it. The tail is loose. I had to glue one of the feet back on, and it's stuffed with cotton. Paul saw that and he said, oh, I can get you something better. Anyway, moles, their species name is Aquaticus, Scalopus aquaticus, because Carl Linnaeus, the man who came up with the binary name system of our plants and our animals, he had a dead mole sent to him and he looked at these feet and he thought, this thing has to swim in water. These things are like paddles and it must swim around. So he gave it the species name Aquaticus. It was an aquatic mole as far as he was concerned. Well, turns out these aren't aquatic at all, but they do essentially swim through the dirt. These huge claws that they have, check that out. Those claws move through the dirt. This little nose is very sensitive to touch and to smell. So if there's grubs in an area, the mole can come in. And if there are cicadas in an area, the moles will come in and they'll feast on them. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe the mole eruption that they're seeing right now in Marseilles is going to die down as this periodical cicada emergence comes to an end, which it is. Nancy's going to call me in about 2 weeks and let me know if she's seeing any more mole tunnels. She said right across the street from her is a large park, and she said she counted 23 mole tunnels while she was by her ice cream. I said, does that park happen to have a lot of trees? It does. So, cicadas feed on tree roots. It's just a theory at this point, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe moles will play a future good-natured hour because the cicadas there. Isn't this just awesome? When do you get to see a mole up close? I should also add that the same jewelry box has little shrews in it too. The thing on shrews, shrews are fascinating as well. Well then, is that better? There we go. Most shrews need to eat every 15 or 20 minutes in order to be able to survive. That's how high their metabolism. So anyway, I'm going to put all of these things back in their boxes and we'll move on. You know, I wanted to mention too at this, before we get too far into things, some of you are better Zoomers than others. I'm probably at the lower end of the spectrum. I'm still getting a handle on this technology. But if you look at your screens, down at the bottom, there is something that says chat. And when you put, you hover your mouse over the chat, you can send me a question or a comment. And if it's a comment, like I see a comment right here that says WTH. One of our nature friends is wondering why the heck are we talking about these things. But if you have a question and you'd rather not say it publicly, shoot me a little note over there in the chat site and we'll get you an answer. We'll also have Q&A at the end too. But there is one more thing before we leave the cicada topic alone for now. Actually, two more things. I've got some things here on my desk. We very soon, usually around July 1st, so tomorrow, maybe July 4th, right in that area, we're gonna start hearing our annual cicadas. Now, I mentioned those in weeks past. They're a little bit different from the periodical cicadas. They're not orange, they're green or brown. They're larger. I got my old collection out. I wanted to show you, this is kind of fun, because these guys only live for about 2 weeks. After living years underground, they come out and they're only out for a week or two and then they die. They mate, they die. And they fall on the ground, fall on the sidewalks. You can amaze your friends and you can be really fun at cocktail parties if you bring a couple of these and you say, I can show you the boys, the difference between the boys and the girls. I'm going to show you right now. Can you see this cicada right here? The back end looks, I've always thought it looks like a mechanical pencil. It's kind of elongated and it's got a hole in the middle where if it was a pencil, the lead would come out. Well, it's not a pencil, it's a boy cicada. So other stuff comes out. This is how we tell the male cicadas from the female. Now the female, see how much pointier her back end is? There's male, here's female. The female cicada, oh, that's better. So the female cicada is very pointed end. And again, the lighting's not great in here tonight, but she has kind of like a sawzall blade, which is her ovipositor. She'll use that to scrape into the twig of a branch. She'll deposit her eggs up in the branch. The eggs hatch in a couple days. The little ones fall down to the ground and they dig in and they attach themselves to a tree root where they'll stay for several years, molting and growing. But again, mechanical pencil, male, pointy sawzall, female. Okay. Now, we did have a question come in, moles versus voles. Mole, letter M, vole, letter V. Voles, believe it or not, all this stuff behind me, I don't have an example of a vole, but they are, I actually call them nature's baked potatoes. They're blunt and they're a rodent. So they're grass, they're seed eaters, they're plant eaters. They don't tunnel in the same way that a mole does. A mole very rarely comes above ground. You can see this is not bad taxidermy. This is just the way their face is. A mole doesn't really have much in the way of eyes. They do have eyes, but they're not really functional because it doesn't need to see. It's underground all the time. And as it is tunneling along, it's smelling and feeling for insects, slugs, grubs, worms, whatever it comes across. It usually only eats things without backbone, so arthropod types of things. So it goes along and feeds on those things. Voles, they might go and make tunnels on top of the grass. They might dig slightly into the grass to make a nest, but they're sighted and they look for grains and grasses, plants to eat. So big difference, rodents versus the insectivores that are moles. If we had a mole skull, which I'm working on getting one someday, you would see moles have canine teeth. They've got molars inside. They've got similar dentition to what you'd see on, say, a bat. They're actually, moles and bats are not that far apart in terms of how they're related. They have very similar diets too. This one is under the ground, bats are up in the air. Voles, being rodents, they would be, they're not real closely related to mice, but they would be in that rodent group. And the reason for all the millipedes, that's a question for everybody. Has everybody been seeing millipedes? I'm gonna guess all the moisture. Millipedes can dry out really easily, and the more humid it is, whether it's in your basement and it's under. In fact, I was actually looking at a lot of millipedes today. I was trying to find some earthworms for a salamander I'm feeding, and I was shocked too to see how many millipedes are around. You want to see cool millipedes? Johnson's Mound has the American millipede, which is big in terms of what we see around here. You know, we usually see the ones that we see usually in our basements or underneath a log or a rock. Those are kind of cosmopolitan species that have moved around different parts of the world. A lot of them have been, they've come here from Europe. But the American millipede, it's, okay, holding my finger up, this is about 3 or 4 inches, about 4 inches long. Big millipedes, they've got red stripes, kind of a blue-gray color on their backs. Really, really awesome millipedes. Johnson's Mound is one place you can see them. Please don't go and collect them, and please don't tell anybody you think might go and collect them, because they're not endangered or anything, but you'd hate to have them all disappear. But moisture favors millipedes. In fact, since we're talking about moisture, let's take a look at some more slides, because something else we're seeing a lot of, and if you've got more questions about millipedes, just let me know. We'll see if we can get some answers. With all the rain we've been having, it has certainly been time for toads. So maybe some of you have been hearing that melodic trilling. This is actually getting very late in the breeding season for toads. But if you think back to when we had all that rain in May, it wasn't all that warm. And toads like rain for breeding. They like actually, all toads need is a little bit of water. They are not at all fussy. It doesn't have to be pristine water with high oxygen content. It doesn't have to be bubbling from a spring. They will jump in a mud puddle, a flooded tire rut, a ditch. Really anywhere that is wet is good enough for a toad. But they are probably I don't know, I would say they're probably one of my most favorite amphibians, because they are just so, this particular toad you're looking at right here, this was outside of Hickory Knolls. I was leaving work, as you can see, after dark one night, and this is a big female. Females are larger than males. She was sitting very close to one of our outside lights, having quite a feast.
Yeah.
Yes? Uh-huh.
We think you're not presenting, actually.
Oh.
It's you.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Whoop. All right, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but you're not. If you're trying to show slides, we see you and not your slides.
Oh, that's not good. Well, thanks for telling me, Kelly. Because I'm female toad.
Looking good, Pam.
All right, yeah.
Love to see your face.
You know what's funny is I got a whole desk full of insects here I could be eating. But all right, let me see if I can, there we go. Let's try this. I'm gonna pull this up again. All right, let's try that. All right, I don't think we need to hear the whole thing again. Is that better?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. So we had a chilly spring, so that's pushed the toad's breeding season a little bit later than we would normally be seeing. Of course, what's normal these days, right? The aftermath of toad breeding are little toad eggs. Now, this is a little tip of the hat to my dad. Can you hear this? Oh, where'd it go? Hold on. All right. So my dad was a big Glenn Miller fan. Does anybody recognize this song?
Can't hear it.
Is that American Patrol?
Could you hear that? Not in the mood.
Is American Patrol?
Not American Patrol.
Serenade, something serenade.
String of Pearls.
Exactly.
So, String of Pearls, Glenn Miller, toad eggs. Keep all those in mind. So if you see a strand of, these little beads are about the size of the larger tapioca granules when you hydrate them. I've got a dark center. If they're in a glump, they're a frog. If they're in a clump and they're attached to some vegetation, they're probably a salamander. And salamander's eggs hatched a long time ago. But right now, you can go to ponds, streams, flooded tire ruts, and you can find strings of pearls that are actually toad eggs. It only takes a couple of days for these guys to hatch. And when they do, we end up with these guys. So I these the other day. This was from far from pristine pond. It was a retention pond in front of a retirement facility. If you are near water and you see tiny little black tadpoles, and lots of them, we're talking not just dozens, but probably hundreds, an inch or less in size, those are future toadlets. Those are toad tadpoles. You can see, now let's see, this was, this particular group was about 10 days ago that I dipped these, and you can see some are already getting their hind legs. I think there was a couple in here that actually were getting front legs too. This was for a program. Yeah, here's one up at the top here who's getting his front legs. We did a senior program called Life in a Pond. But toads are exceedingly prolific, and they, just like cicadas, they have this overwhelm the predator survival strategy where they will emerge. Somehow all these tadpoles that are at slightly different stages of development, they're going to finish up at just about the same time, and they're going to leave that pond in huge groups. And let's see, we've got some here that don't have any legs at all. We've got hind legs, well, front legs. You get the picture. Come out, and they are going to look like this. Just a little bit big. In fact, this guy was not freshly emerged. I would say he'd been out a couple of days. When they first come out, they're just about the size, maybe a little bit bigger than a pencil eraser. And they go hopping around. They have the advantage of numbers because there's hundreds of them. So even a very determined flock of birds is not going to be able to catch every last one of them. Some of those are going to survive. Besides numbers, they also have this cryptic marking. These spots act as camouflage. And now here on my hand, doesn't blend in all that well. I guess I should be grateful for that I don't have a lot of warts on my hands. But here, can anybody spot the toad here? This was right behind Hickory Knolls. We had a few emerge, several emerge, scattered to the wind. Let's zoom in here.
The green.
Oh, right here. Here, we'll go back. Right there. Their little toad buddy hiding. But I would say that's pretty effective camouflage right there. And of course, takes about 3 or 4 years to attain this size. Most of those hundreds and hundreds of toadlets are not going to survive. Conversely, once they attain their adult size, they can live for several years. The key to the adult toad survival are these glands right back here. They're called parotoid glands, and they have a little bit of a toxin in them. There was another slide I was going to put in tonight, and then lucky for you guys, good sense prevailed. It was a predated toad that I found in the parking lot last summer. Whatever the predator was knew that these glands can cause retching, I guess would be one word, gagging would be another word, vomiting would be the ultimate if they were to actually consume quite a bit of that toxin. But it's not a deadly toxin, but it certainly is something that will make you want to spit it out. But anyway, the toad picture that I have, the animal ate from the back of the toad and stopped right about here. So this isn't a perfect defense, but it does help the toad a lot of the time. It's so distasteful a lot of times that the toad will get spit out and survive if a predator tries to eat it. Doesn't work on snakes though. I've seen a lot of garter snakes eat toads, smaller toads. But it is definitely time for toads. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. They're out there, very, very prevalent these days. This warm weather is definitely their kind of weather too. The rains, even though we're late in the season for toads, they're still quite active out there. All right, let's go, let's stop sharing for a minute. We've got some other creatures. I think I mentioned in the promo last night that bumblebees have a superpower. We're going to take a look at what our bumbles have been up to in a little story called Buzz Pollination. So you're probably thinking, geez, that's an annoying sound. So let's go on to the next slide. Bees buzz, it's what they do. But buzz pollination, as we'll see in a couple of slides, is something completely different. Now, a lot of flowers, this is a thistle. This photo was by a local photographer, Robert Anderson. He took this last year at Boy Scout Island. This is a longhorn bee. It's got long antennae. It specializes in gathering its food from thistles. The thistle doesn't do anything to prevent pollinators. In fact, it's attracting pollinators. It's putting the pollen and the nectar out there for whoever wants it can come and get it. And the longhorn bee is one of many pollinators that will visit a thistle plant. Here, this is a prairie rose outside of Hickory Knolls. This is a member of the Halictidae, which are the sweat bees. I took this picture last year, gorgeous bee, slightly out of focus because that's my photography. And then it got photobombed by this little guy down here, which is a syrphid fly. They are bee mimics. They, you can tell it's a bee and not, I mean, it's a fly and not a bee because it only has 2 wings. Bees, and it can be hard to see here, but bees, wasps, they all have 2 pairs of wings or 4 total wings, whereas flies only have 2 wings. If you look really closely underneath the wings, true flies will have these 2 small structures here. They're called halteres. Halteres, I think of these as the kind of the balance bar. If you've ever watched, like, you know, the tightrope walkers, Carl Walenda walking across the canyon, they'll carry that stick, that long bar that helps them keep their balance. This acts in a similar function for flies. It keeps them balanced. Years ago, the thinking is anyway that they shed their other pair of wings in favor of halteres. There was some evolutionary advantage way back when, and they've kept that trait to this day. That's why the order that flies are in is called Diptera, for 2 wings. Anyway, here again, we've got a flower that is putting out all kinds of pollen and all kinds of nectar, and bees and flies can take advantage. Dandelions, know them, love them or hate them, they're everywhere. I was actually videoing these are 12-spotted ladybugs, and they are one of the few ladybug species that can survive strictly on plant proteins. So they were there eating nectar that day. And here's a little springtime early pollinator. This was back in April. This bee flies in, grabs its little sip of nectar, grabs a little bit of pollen, and boom, it's gone. Because it's all out there, it's free for the taking. Dandelions want to give away their pollen and their nectar. That's why we get so many dandelions, is that pollen moves around. Now, bumblebees. They'll go to those other flowers that we looked at, but bumblebees have a superpower, and it has to do with their size. They are one of the few groups of bees that can perform what we call buzz pollination. They can use that bulk to shake the anthers. Anthers are the male parts of the flower. The way I remember it is anther sounds like antler. Male deer have antlers. Male parts of the flower are called anthers. So they shake the anther and they get it to release the pollen. And in a lot of flowers, they don't have to shake very hard, but there's certain types of flowers. It almost seems like it's an evolutionary disadvantage. They don't want to give their pollen up. There's only certain types of pollinators that can get them to release it. Let's take a look here at the bumblebee doing its work. Sarah Kimmer, you might recognize these flowers. This was at your house. Watch how this bumblebee manhandles your flowers. I mean, just using that bulk. In fact, let me stop here. That lump right there, that's pollen that the bee has collected. But bumblebees are bulky bees. They use that bulk to not only their advantage, but to the flower's advantage too. There's certain types of flowers, like I was saying, they don't give their pollen freely, but bumbles can get them to give it up. Now, here on our slide here, those of you who are native plant people, you might recognize over here the fringed gentian and over here the bottled gentian. Look at how tightly clasped those petals are. Gentians, there's not a lot of animals that will eat gentian. It's not grazed upon by deer. It's got apparently a very bitter flavor to it. So it needs to get its pollen out, but it needs a very specific type of pollinator to do the job. And that's where the bees and their buzz pollination come in. They can use their bulk to push open these petals, and then they can go down inside to where those anthers are. They can collect that pollen, and in doing so, they'll get some on the hairs of their body, and then when they go to the next flower, some of that pollen is going to come off. These two species won't cross-pollinate, but once it finishes on one bottle gentian, it'll go to another bottle gentian, or one fringe gentian to another, and it'll move that pollen around. Not many bees besides bumbles can do that. In fact, no other bees. The gentian is completely dependent on pollination by bumblebees. Now, if you're not a native plant person, you might be thinking, well, how does this affect me? Well, there are certain food crops that need to be pollinated or do best when they're pollinated by bumblebees. Best example is locally are tomatoes that are grown out at the Mighty Vine greenhouse out in, Susie, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's in Rochelle, but Mighty Vine has actually found that it favors their crops and their yields if they have colonies of bumblebees in their greenhouses. It's a lot faster than having humans move that pollen around. And research has shown that even though tomatoes can be pollinated by wind, when a bee moves that pollen around, it's even better. I got that information from the University of California, but it's on other websites as well. These Solanaceae plants have a really good relationship, close relationship with bumblebees. Honeybees, they get all the press, but they can't do this. Only the bumbles can do buzz pollination. Now, before we leave this, I did want to mention that carpenter bees can also buzz pollinate. You notice they are similar to bumbles with a couple of major differences. Now, this is a female carpenter bee. The males have a big yellow, kind of like a rectangle on the forehead. And this picture is from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, their native bees page. But I love the way they show these two angles. A carpenter bee's bottom is almost hairless. It's shiny, it's black. If we go back a couple slides here to our bumble, you can see it's very furry and fuzzy. But carpenter bees are shiny. Now, and they are bulky. They have that strength and that ability to buzz pollinate as well. So I know carpenter bees, they don't have that great of a reputation. We always associate them with damage to bare wood, which they do, but they have a role to play as well. In fact, I talked to a woman the other day. She said, you know what, I can replace the wood on my deck. I can't replace the role that they play in the ecology of my yard. It's a great quote. Now, before we leave this, there is one more slide I want to share. This is from a couple of years ago. One of our King County certified naturalists had sent me a picture. She said there's some other bees that seem to be hanging out where the carpenter bees were last year. This is the insect that she was seeing, and it turns out, and we've talked a few slides ago about bees and flies. This is actually a bee fly. So it's a fly, not a bee. It's only got 2 wings, not 4. But they lay their eggs in carpenter bee holes. So I know, again, a lot of times when you see carpenter bees, your first instinct is to spray them or to call an exterminator. You got to get rid of them. But they do have a natural control in the tiger bee fly. These flies will seek out the carpenter bee larva, and they will lay their eggs in there. Oh, I said I wasn't going to say larva today. sorry, um, the baby carpenter bees, and they parasitoid means that the parasite kills its host. So these tiger bee flies are a natural means of carpenter bee control. So kind of a weird way to end buzz pollination, but it was just a neat kind of a connection, and that's what ecology is all about. That's why nature works the way it does, because everything, even if we can't see it immediately, you dig down deep enough and you find out everything is kind of connected. All right. Well, you know, it's been awfully warm lately, and I take my dogs out for a walk, usually after dark. I have a dog that likes to bark at other dogs, and I find the later I go, the fewer dogs are out. So we can have nice, quiet walks if I go out after 10 o'clock or so, which leads to amazing discoveries under street lights and under porch lights. So as we go through these summer weeks, I want to try and show you some of the cool things that hang out. Even though I very anti-light pollution, the more you can keep lights low, the better, but you can have a porch light that directs all of its light down. That's what I've done. And this is what I found the other day. I was hanging out in the front yard, and I looked at, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up here. I looked at the siding and I thought, good heavens, what's this? Now, just a little bit of background. We have, oh gosh, there's about 10,000 different kinds of moths that live just in, I'm sorry, 2,000 different kinds of moths just in Illinois. And so I'm not going to pretend to be able to show you exactly what this species is, but we can get it down to family, the plume moths. Maybe you've seen these hanging out on your door. They're really easy to spot if they're against something they don't blend into. This was, I think this was the door frame in Hickory Knolls. Where they tend to blend in better is on a door frame where there's the lawnmower has blown grass against it and it's dried. You can almost not distinguish these guys from dried bits of grass. It's a very effective camouflage. This is a very common type of plume moth that we have in this area. I don't know the exact species, because as easy as it is to identify a plume moth by that T shape to their bodies, it's really hard to get them down to genus or species. But this is the general family that we're talking about, a T-shaped kind of moth. Well, the other night I was looking at my siding under the porch light, and I saw this crazy guy. And I thought, wow, that is one of the fanciest plume moths I've ever seen. So I wanted to see if I could figure out what kind it was. And I tell you, I started flipping through field guides. I went online to my favorite online field guide, bugguide.net. And the array of different types is just, it's mind-boggling. If you're not an entomologist specializing in plume moths, it's going to be tough to get it down to species. Well, as luck would have it, I also I follow a group on Facebook. I think I've mentioned them before, Insects and Spiders of Illinois. And they, people were posting very, very similar pictures to this. And the first one that came up that looked like this, it said it was a rose plume moth. Rose like the flower. And I thought, oh, okay, I have a rose, a very kind of anemic, not doing very well rose up in a little crowded section in my front yard. And then, oh, what do you know? The little rose plume moth found the rose. And then someone else posted another similar looking moth, and it was identified as a grape plume moth. And I thought, aha! I have tons of grapevine. It's growing out of control on the fence in the back. It's a great screen. Keeps, the backyard nice and private. It's going up the cedar tree I have. It's growing up the birch tree that I have. I have grapes everywhere. And the grape plume moth would make total sense. When other people are seeing things and you think you're seeing things too, chances are you are seeing the same thing. So grape plume moths, check your porch lights tonight. If you've got grapevines in your yard, check it out. This is just one crazy looking moth. And this is just as small as this other one. This is, I can't remember if this is my thumb or my index finger, but we're talking about a moth that's less than an inch, but just really amazing. You can see how they got their name plume too, from these very feather-like wings that they have. So great plume moths in the spotlight under your porch light. Now, I'm going to preface this with, I hadn't planned this, but a couple hours ago, tech support puppy here, Boker, he's sleeping on my foot right now, but my coworker, Karina, was petting him, and she got this funny look on her face, and she said, I think he has a tick. And where the heck would he have gotten a tick? I don't know. We haven't been out anywhere off-roading. We walk mainly on sidewalks. I don't know if this was in my yard, maybe in the grapevine, or if it was somewhere, weeds at the schoolyard or something. But I'm gonna put this right up in front of the camera where you can see an engorged dog tick. This is just to say these guys are out there. We always warn people when we go for hikes in the natural areas, whether it's Hickory Knolls or Norris Woods, or if we're out at the forest preserves. Ticks are a part of the landscape, but I have no idea of where this one was hiding that Boker would have picked it up. But you can see it's been on him for a few days. I will probably do a segment on ticks sometime pretty soon, because this looks to be like a big tick here. This is a dog tick, not a deer tick. The reason I know that, and these parts are going to be too small for you to see, but this little creature has pretty small, let's see, oh, now you can see it. It's got a tiny head and tiny mouth parts. The deer tick has huge mouth parts in comparison. Deer ticks are very hard to remove because of those big mouth parts. And as bad of a reputation as ticks have for being blood-sucking, disease-carrying little creatures, I really got to hand it to them for their adaptations. They are so good at what they do. They not only do they have those mouth parts that get into the skin, tap into your blood, and start sucking, but they actually have a glue that they secrete to attach themselves even more firmly to your skin. So anyway, look forward to more about ticks in the future, but this was something really took me by surprise. And if you've got a dog, or even you yourself spend some time outside, I just wanted to give you that little bit of warning. So we're gonna wrap up. I've got a charming little story here I wanted to share with you. This was a series of emails that we received. Gosh, I think it goes back to, let's see, May 31st. Let me see if I can get some pictures to come up. Where did she go here? Oh, there she is. Okay, so I got this email on this was Sunday, May 31st, 10:17 a.m. Hi, Pam. Ducks moved in and built a nest in an alcove at the base of our front porch. I will send you a picture. The nest area is about 2 feet above grade as the duckling drops. Also, we're in Eagle Brook in Geneva. We don't have any ponds close by. We believe the eggs are about 10 days old. Do you have any suggestions? This is from our friends Bob and Jane Foster in Geneva. Well, I tell you, the best thing, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit so you can see what this lady was up to here. Now, this is a great example of a duck. You've heard that expression. This was in her first rodeo. She knows what she's doing. She has found a nest spot here that has got protection on two sides. Now, some might argue that, well, she's going to be boxed in here if a predator comes in, but this is a house. And most predators, maybe a raccoon might dare come this close, but this is a very safe area for a duck. Nesting out in the open, she's going to be vulnerable to predator attacks from all sides. So she's got herself a pretty neat setup here, and she's got the periodic sauna effect here from the dryer vent. So the Fosters noted, here she is, what do they do? Best advice in this case is to not do anything. This is her choice. She laid the eggs. Ducks will lay their eggs over, actually all birds do this, they lay about an egg a day. Now ducks, though, they don't start incubating their eggs until the last egg is laid. That way, when it comes time for the babies to hatch, when the eggs hatch, they all come out at about the same time. That'll be important here in just a little bit. So I explained to the Fosters that the best action is no action at all. She seems to know what she's doing. So they wrote back later that day, thanks for the information. I've sent you a photo. I also wanted to add that we have a robin nesting on a wreath and another wall on the other side of our walkway. We're going to leave the entire maternity ward as undisturbed as possible. Thanks again for your good-natured help. All right, so that was May 31st. And so didn't hear from the Fosters for a while. I sent them an email thanking them for sending the photos. And Bob writes that Jane said that, by the way, they named the duck Daisy. Daisy was put off by the dryer at first, but has learned to accept it and even enjoys the warm breeze. We hope to have some duckling photos in a few weeks. So ducks, mentioned that, the eggs, because she doesn't start incubating until they're all laid, they all hatch at about the same time. That incubation period is about 28 days. So I got an email from the Fosters on June 22nd. So he had estimated that they were about 10 days old at this point. So from June 1st to June 22nd through, so, it's about right on schedule. Bob says, just to follow up, this is what happened this morning. Let's zoom in on this photo. Here they are. Daisy's a mama. She had 8 eggs that had hatched, and she has 8 ducklings. He says, I assume they're going to be marching off soon. Is this correct? Also, do we need to send out birth announcements? Thanks for all your help. So the Fosters, as I mentioned, they live in Geneva near a golf course, and actually the pond was about a block away. So Daisy lined up all of her little ducklings there. You can see them, he said, here they are crossing the border. They crossed the sidewalk, crossed the street. I guess they had an escort. By 1 p.m. on Friday, on Monday, June 22nd, Daisy had her ducks in a row and took off to the west. We followed them across the street, then north a few wattles, where she led the entire regiment across the street with the help of some local kids, then low-tailed it for the golf course. I can't blame her for wanting a nicer location than under our dryer vent. I asked them if I could share their story. They said, yes, the story is public record as far as we're concerned, but we can't speak for Daisy. Anyway, it's just a neat little story, and it's something I wanted to share with you all because 9.99 times out of 10, nature knows what it's doing. If there's no overt injuries or signs of illness, really the best thing that we can do is just leave them be. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to see if we have any questions. Anybody at all? If not, I'd like to thank you all for once again coming to have some fun. I'm going to wake up tech support here. Hey, Oker, come here. We're going to do our sign off. Little Bo. Boy, you know what? He's going to get to the point where.
Can't do that.
Pam,
Yeah.
the Mary Chivo here.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, question.
Yeah.
Hawks, Cooper's Hawks.
Yes.
We live in Surrey Hill. We have a pretty big yard. We are
Okay.
just harassed by these large, I mean, they are on the patio chair, they're in the garden. Obviously, they've taken all the rats and the squirrels.
Okay.
We can't go out in the yard because they're swarming our yard. What do you suppose they're swarming our yard for?
They
Birdseed?
probably got babies.
Okay.
And they're probably very defensive of those youngsters. Now, Mary, refresh my memory. You have a neighbor with chickens, right?
Yeah, but they're not anywhere near the chicken yards. The coop, they don't really go, but they're sitting like on our lawn in the
Okay.
morning. Now, we did have a cat in the screened-in porch. He's
Okay.
inside, but all my rabbits and all my squirrels are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they are
Oh.
like sitting on the patio chair in the backyard.
Well, now you can exert your human. Sorry, You're human. Do you have a dog? You want a dog?
No dogs. No dogs.
They feel very safe there, Mary, and that's good for on your part. You've created an environment there where they don't feel threatened. They've chosen to raise a family there, which is another. Now,
Probably-
let me ask you this: do you have bird feeders or no?
Yeah, well, lots of bird feeders, and I think we have huge trees over here in Surrey Hill, this old part, and so we've seen them up on some of the spruces. And,
Okay.
But a couple mornings, I mean, they're like sitting out there on the chair. There's two. I think there's a third one. We're not sure. But we just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something,
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely defined. We've defined them. My husband's the birder. They are Cooper's hawk.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they're like huge.
I would say if you can take it, it'll take a little adjustment on your part, but if you can bring your feeders in for a few weeks, are you getting any birds at your feeder with all?
Oh yeah, lots of them. When the hawks aren't here,
Interesting.
the blue jays, cardinals,
Okay.
nuthatches,
Okay.
In fact, we had some little woodpecker that went after a tree. It's just, I don't know. They seem to be very aggressive this year.
Okay.
So
Yeah. They're probably defending the area from. They want to make sure their youngsters have a safe environment. They want to also maximize what they're getting. In terms of any little songbirds they can grab that might be by your feeders. And then, I was really surprised. People a couple of blocks from me have backyard chickens. I didn't think a Cooper's hawk was big enough to take a chicken, but they did.
Oh yeah.
So I think you
huge.
got a 1-2 punch there. You've got the chickens and the bird feeders both.
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah.
They're huge.
Well,
and I wasn't sure, I thought maybe, I went out in my garden to pick green beans. They finally came up because the rabbits are all been dead, taken away. And they swarmed down on right over the top of my head.
Wow.
And I thought maybe they're after my hair, so I'm going to wear a bike helmet when I go up there.
Well, let me know. I've said this for people who have trouble with red-winged blackbirds.
Oh yeah.
If you if you put eyeballs, you know, those eyeball jiggly eye things on the
Yeah.
helmet, that keeps the red wings away. I
Yeah,
would
no,
think it might be for
the
food.
Morton Arboretum is swarming with those guys. They're hysterical. They're
Yeah.
hysterical over there. But I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something, you know, we've always had them, and we've had the red tails at different times. We've always
Mhm.
had them here, even
Yeah.
before the neighbors with the chickens. But they're I mean, they're on the ground looking at the house. You know, I'm thinking,
Uh-huh.
what do they want?
Yeah, they want you to keep feeding the birds so they've got stuff to eat.
Yeah, maybe, you know, we are big bird feeders, so maybe that's the bird thing. But the trees over here in this part of St. Charles, some of our trees are very, very huge.
Uh-huh.
They're way, way up there, you know, and so you think maybe they might have a nest around here somewhere?
Yeah, I do. I do.
But shouldn't their babies be born already?
Yeah, yeah, you might. Do they all have the same pattern on their chest, or do you
Yeah,
have some?
there were two large ones, and my neighbor,
Okay.
the one that owns the chickens, she said she saw three. I've not seen three. I've just seen two in the last couple days. You know,
Okay.
literally sitting in the yard.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like there's a nest nearby.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
the birds grow to adult size really fast, but they don't get their adult smarts for about a year. So the young Cooper's hawks, they've fledged yet, but they're probably getting close. If they have a young Cooper's hawk has, instead of horizontal orange colored bars on its breast, it'll have vertical, the juvenile ones will have vertical streaks on their
Yeah,
breast.
okay. No, I'm not seeing these look pretty. I think these are adults. And the two of them are like they like hang out together.
Ah,
So
okay, maybe they're
it's just,
tag teaming it.
we are having an hysterical time with them. It's really very interesting. So anyway, but they know, I had talked to you about earlier about the thing. I think whatever went under the porch, they got.
Oh, okay.
They got
So
the
you never got
chipmunks.
to figure out what that was, huh?
No, I think it was chipmunks. It might have even been a rabbit
Okay.
because we had the rabbits are all gone. My poor baby rabbits. I just love them
Oh,
to death, and the babies and the mothers are all gone.
oh,
So you guess who took them?
yeah. Yeah, I think we know that. Who had
Yeah, well, my
pepper.
green beans. We had our first green beans from the garden tonight. So, you know, I don't know if I was happy or sad because it means
Oh, you didn't have rabbits eating your garden, huh?
no, they're not eating. So I just want to check in on the hawks. I'll keep an eye on
Okay.
it, see what happens.
Yeah, let me see if you see any youngsters coming out.
Yeah, we'll try and get pictures. We're not good about pictures.
Oh, I hear you.
But, you know, but thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome, Mary. Anybody else? Oh,
All right.
all the,
Good show. Good deal. Thank you.
so yeah. Tech support's getting really tired. All right, buddy.
Some flowers don't like to give up their pollen. Is there a reason for that? Wouldn't they want
You know, it's all processed over, you know, millennia of evolution, but I think to ensure, like they found that you know, in like with the tomatoes and other food crops, the fruit that's produced is larger and hardier if it's pollinated by those bumblebees. And so if you think about in an evolutionary perspective, if a plant can produce hardy offspring as opposed to just kind of fair to middling offspring, the advantage is going to go to the hardier offspring. So over time that pollen protection developed. It doesn't seem very intuitive though. It seems like it should be all the flowers should be putting out all the pollen all the time. But Some are very selective about it because it benefits them in the long run.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. All right, well, I think if anybody else has any other questions, I think we'll say a good-natured good night. We'll be back next week. We're going to be looking at the phenomenon called allelopathy, which is where plants kill other plants in order to survive. We're also going to do a little public, in fact, it would have been nice to mention it to Mary just now, a little public service announcement about rodenticides and trying to campaign to not use them as a form of rodent control. We're going to take a look at the stag beetle and what else happens to crawl across my desk in the meantime. So everybody have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you back here. It's a holiday week, so if you're on vacation, I'll be here. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Kate. Take care.
Thanks,
You
Pam.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Pam.